definitely haven't heard me talk about getting roofied, the police finding me in a ditch, or living in the airport for a day. And that's because we don't talk about Florida. Until now. 4+ years later, and I'm finally willing to share a traumatic life experience that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg could write an entire movie about. It's summer 2019. I book a budget flight out to Florida so I can race the 10K at U20 Nationals. My buddy Brando comes out to visit me with 2 of his friends from Jersey. We're all staying together in this Airbnb that I booked. That could have fitted so poorly. Brando's friends, Jorge and Steven, that he brought from Jersey were wild. Steven and his ex, butt-ass naked, cooking food. They go rent some jet skis. And then Jorge gets horny, and he decides to go get a happy ending at a nearby massage parlor. I remember every detail of this trip until I didn't. So I raced my 10K. The conditions are awful. The humidity rails me like Johnny Sins. After this bad race, me and Brando go back to the Airbnb and I eat a little food. We get ready to go out, and this is where one of the most embarrassing moments, or a series of moments, of my life begins to happen. Full disclaimer, I was 18, barely an adult, and it had only been 2 years or so since I had gotten out of a cult situation. I was just understanding what free will was. For lack of a better analogy, imagine dropping an Amish kid with no preparation in the middle of New York City. That was me, except it was Miami. Again, I'm 18, I'm underage, I can't actually technically go out, so what I bring with me to Florida is Kyle Lewicki, who had graciously donated his old fake ID because he didn't need one anymore to my best friend and I. Ever seen Superbad? Kyle Lewicki was our McLovin. Kyle Lewicki was legendary. Kyle Lewicki got me and my roommate through freshman year. Naturally, I brought Kyle Lewicki to Florida. What we realized was that Brando looked more like Kyle Lewicki and I looked more like Brando. So we switched. Kyle was an upper class. Actually, I'm gonna need a towel. Brando was carrying Kyle Lewicki and I was carrying Brando's passport. Sorry, I lied. The scene is finally set. This is where the real story begins. Our first destination of the night is this rooftop bar, which is on top of this really tall building. Obviously, the elevator door is opening and I'm ready to flash Brando's passport with his name, address, and everything memorized. No one actually ID'd me. We walk up to the bar, there's a pool next to it, and there's these 2 little girls in it. They're like 10 and 12. It might seem like I'm really not keeping this linear, but like the details all come together. So there's like these 2 little girls, we talk to them for a second, don't really say anything, but then we go to the bar to get drinks. Brando goes and orders the first round of shots for him and I. I'm watching the bartender pour these shots and stuff, because I've never been to a bar before, so I'm fascinated. But then I turn my back and I'm talking to Brandon's friends that were with us. The first round of shots for him and I. So I turn back around to Brando and we take the shots and then we go dance on the dance floor or something. After a bit, Brando decides he wants to go get us some more shots. Those shots were never gotten. So me and Brando's friends go and check on Brandon. He's talking over a drink to this random 4-year-old woman. Now what you gotta understand about Brando, this man is an absolute dog. His body count is like the Library of Alexandria. Comprehensive, extensive, lost and forgotten. I'm out here already holistically plastered over a shot and a drink that I had earlier. Meanwhile, Brando was trying to get with a cougar. Jorge and Steven are trying to go do hookah. They're boys with Brando, and they decide that they're gonna let him do his thing, and they're gonna take me to wherever they're going. I remember arguing with them about not wanting to leave Brando behind and not having a good feeling about it. And then basically the last thing I remember was being in the elevator, the doors ominously closing, my last thing seeing Brando across the bar talking to this old lady. It was like a movie scene, but in reality, this is where a bad movie was about to start. We went down to the street level to this place called Spice Resto Lounge, which had hookah, and I only remember the name because I had to memorize it so I could go there the next day. We'll get to that. Let me explain the vibe of this place. Not only did it have hookah, it had food, drinks, and lots of dancing. Spice Resto Lounge was a Latin nightclub. Keyword, Latin. So the dancing was, bachata, tango, salsa. And as legend has it, Steven and Jorge explained it later on, I go into the middle of the dance floor where everybody is salsaing or something, and I begin to start ripping just Fortnite dances. I'm hitting the Orange Justice aggressively, and I'm bumping into people, knocking drinks out of their hands. I am making a scene. I was 18 though, I swear. The frontal lobe was still lobing. I have no recollection of this either. So Jorge and Steven managed to get me outside. At this point, Brando's passport that I had been carrying and my wallet, they were gone. They had tried to give me a glass of water, but instead of taking the glass of water, I grabbed one of their beers, tugged the whole thing, and then slammed the glass on the ground. This is all crazy. I was a shy, timid 18-year-old. Jorge and Steven go to get me food, but when they get back, I've disappeared. This is the part where the cop finds me in the gutter. Officer Gutierrez or something like that. I still had my phone, which had my ID in the case, and so he was able to put all that together and realize that I was just simply an underage kid, completely out of it, laying in the gutter. I do kind of have a hazy memory of trying to drunkenly talk to the cop, and I also kind of remember throwing up a lot, several times, so many times. I think that's why I was in the gutter. The police officer gets on my phone and is on Snapchat trying to call like close friends and family. The sheer ridiculousness of this situation is completely unlike me. So when Officer Gutierrez called my friends in the middle of the night, this is Officer Gutierrez. I'm here in Hollywood, Florida. Come get your boy. He's met with, "You're not a cop. and Nemo's not in Florida. Thankfully, despite being gaslit by a bunch of random teenagers in New Mexico, the officer kept trying. He finally got a hold of my brother, who had the address of my Airbnb. The good news, he managed to get me into a lift, which got me back to my Airbnb just as Jorge and Steven are leaving to the airport, so I get the keys from them and I'm able to get into the Airbnb. The bad news, somewhere along the way I lost my phone. This is where my memories started coming back. I remember getting out of the lift, getting into the Airbnb, completely exhausted and crawling into bed. The story is far from over. Later that night or morning, I remember Brando somehow crawling into bed with me. I wake up in the morning, I'm feeling awful. I'm in a bad place. I had just run an all-out 10K the night before, and then I got roofied. To make matters worse, while I'm groaning, Brando is just giggling. He keeps saying, "This is like the Hangover, bro. This is like the Hangover." Yeah, that's funny, but we were suffering the real life consequences firsthand in real life. And come to find out, Brando had lost everything too. Wallet, phone, Kyle Lewicki, his pants. He literally woke up in the stairwell of a parking garage in just his boxers. He somehow managed to remember our address and get a ride back there. Suspicious, I know. He kept saying he looked like a crackhead running around in his boxers on the streets of Florida. So naturally, the only person who's gonna give a crackhead a ride is another crackhead, which is apparently how he got back. Again, I'm feeling really shit. We have no food, so Brando shoplifts some peanuts for me. Now begins the hangover journey part of our morning, where we're trying to figure out what the hell happened last night. We're on a ticking time clock though. We have to check out of the Airbnb at like noon or something. We go outside, we're trying to figure out what we can do. Suddenly Brando pipes up and says, "I have an idea, bro." And I have hope for a brief second. But then he walks around the corner, sticks his hand into the bush, and pulls out a waterlogged piece of paper with a phone number haphazardly written in nail polish. Apparently, this was the phone number of the crackhead lady that had given Brando a ride last night. She had repeatedly made Brando promise to her that he would pay her in the morning for the ride. This was instantly not a resource we were going to use. One, she wanted money, which we had none. Two, given the context of everything, she definitely seemed a little crazy. From there, we walked back to this really tall hotel or whatever that had the rooftop bar, which was closed for the morning. We walked to the front and we talked to like the doorman. He does his best, but eventually he lets us know he cannot find any of our belongings. And this is where it really begins to sit in that I have indeed reached rock bottom. I'm standing in front of this hotel in humid, hot as shit ass Florida weather. Brando proceeds to take off his hat and just stick his head in this decorative fountain in front of the hotel. We're also completely clueless at this point. His friends that were with me the night before, they're still on their flight and we haven't been able to talk to them. Also, we don't have phones. We have no idea what happened at all. We get back to the Airbnb. We do our best, given the circumstances, to try and clean up. This is something that will live with me for the rest of my life. Every time I open up the Airbnb app, I have the opportunity to read a scathing review from the host about getting cheese stuck in the fucking oven grate. She literally went on for a paragraph talking about how goddamn melted cheese was really fucking hard to clean. She would highly recommend against me ever staying in an Airbnb again. Ma'am, if you're watching, I am incredibly sorry about the cheese in your oven grate, but that was the least of my problems that day. But just so you know, for the last 5 years of my life, I have been incredibly conscious and aware of melted cheese getting under the oven grate, and I have done my best to prevent it. Now, prior to her, finding out about the melted cheese under the oven grate, we talk to the host, briefly explain the situation to her, and she lets us use her phone, and we get on Snapchat. And this is where all the pieces begin to fall in place, and not in a really good way. Remember those two little girls that we had spoken to earlier at the pool at that rooftop bar? Apparently, they had Brando's phone. How do we know this? They were literally on his story waltzing around, with the "at us at the caption. Brando was so embarrassed that immediately he deleted it. Understandable, because that's not a good look. But he literally deleted our only hope of finding his phone. On my end, all I could figure out was how I had gotten back to the Airbnb the night before, and the fact that the police officer had called several of my friends before he got a hold of my brother. My legs are getting tired. I'm getting a chair. By this point though, we really do gotta get moving. Brando calls an Uber on the lady's phone. We get the phone back to the lady. We leave the Airbnb, and Brando is about to head to the airport because he has a flight going back to Jersey that day. So he's gonna be okay. But me, remember, I had booked this trip on a tight budget. My flight, the cheapest flight, left out of Fort Lauderdale the following day. So here I am. It's the middle of the day. I'm stranded in the middle of Florida with all of my worldly possessions strapped to my back. No wallet, no phone, no money, no bitches, no nothing. By then, we had talked to Jorge and Steven, and they had told us that Spice Resto Lounge was the name of the place that I had gone to last night. So with the slim sliver of hope that I might be able to find my stuff, I walked there. But just like the hotel, I didn't have much luck. I didn't have an ID. It was pretty evident that I wasn't 21, so the owner wasn't super keen on keeping me in his establishment. Also, I didn't remember what happened the night before. For those reasons, I don't think the owner was super keen on trying to help me out either. I've basically been kicked out of that establishment. I'm really starting to feel it. I just ran that 10K the night before. My body's still trying to metabolize what the hell kind of drug, I don't know. And I'm getting really hungry. The only thing I've had to eat that day are the peanuts that Brando shoplifted earlier. So I walk into a Walgreens. I talked to the lady at the checkout and I explained my situation in like 10 seconds. I swear to God, I will remember this Walgreens employee for the rest of my life. She had the kindest face and she insisted that I could get anything I wanted from the store, and then she proceeded to pay for it personally. Didn't have the mental energy to pick the best options, but I walked out of the store after grabbing some pistachios and a coconut water. And in that moment, that was enough. That was everything. I had booked my Airbnb for that night ahead of time. It wasn't within walking distance and I didn't know how to check in or anything, so I still needed to sort all of that out. A crucial detail that I might have left out earlier was that I somehow subconsciously had remembered my brother's phone number, even though I had never memorized it. So I did have that going for me. Although remembering someone's phone number isn't very helpful if you don't have a phone. I walk over to this T-Mobile store and I pretend that I'm very interested in their iPads and iPhones. I use iMessage on them to text my older brother to sort out the Airbnb situation and honestly the whole trip. But after being there for an hour or so in the nice air conditioning, it was time for me to go. My Airbnb wouldn't let me check in until around 6 or something. It was still very far away, but I had told my brother I would find a way to call him or something so he could get me an Uber to get there. It's still like the middle of the day, it's hot, and I have some time to burn. I walk over to a public library, read a book for an hour or two to take my mind off of things. And then I have to convince the librarian to let me call my brother, even though it's against library policy. And eventually she gives in. I call my brother. He gets me the Uber to get to my Airbnb. I get there, exhausted, and finally in a safe place, I fall asleep for a bit. So a little more context about this Airbnb. It's a hostel situation. Not hostile, but like hostel. There's a bunch of other people staying there. I wake up after my nap a little bit after 7. Some of the other people who are in the hostel tell me, they're like, "Oh, are you Nemo? Someone Uber eats you this sandwich." I know I didn't, but it turns out it was my brother. And that meant the world to me because I had no food and, given the situation, I don't think I've ever been more emotionally broken up about a fucking sandwich. But I cherished that sandwich. I ate half of it and then I saved the other half for later. I go join this other dude on the couch to watch some TV because I have another source of entertainment. It turns out he's watching Better Call Saul. Even though I was from Albuquerque at that point, I had never seen Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad. Ironically, after that, I was actually hooked, and Better Call Saul has become one of my all-time favorite TV shows. I start pointing out places that I recognize in the show, and me and the other guy get to talking. It turns out he's in law school or something too, so he relates to the show. And after I explain a little bit of my situation to him, he's super kind, and he's like, "Yeah, you can use my phone for anything if you need." We talk for like a solid 2 hours or something. I will also remember this guy for the rest of my life. His company was very comforting and much needed after all of that. I wake up the next morning knowing that I have to check out of the Airbnb sometime around noon, and I'm also very aware of the fact that I've run out of food. So naturally, I go for a run. It's what I've done for my entire life. Running is single-handedly the most reliable coping mechanism that I have. Probably the healthiest too. So I ran over this bridge, I ran to the beach, I ran into the ocean, stared out at the open sea, wallowing in the Pacific and my own self-hatred, contemplating the poor life decisions that brought me to that point. Like I said, rock bottom, or that's what I thought. Yet as we'll find out, when life beats you to your knees and you think it couldn't get any worse, life will punch you in the dick, push you over so your nose is in the sand and your ass is in the air. And just when you're expecting to get taken advantage of, it's never what you're expecting. Life doesn't even bother tapping that ass. Instead, life starts curb stomping the shit out of you, ruins your teeth, so you have to get an Invisalign subscription. Anyways, I had to head home from the beach. I'm running back to the Airbnb. I'm starting to get hungry. As I'm running through the tropical neighborhoods of Florida, I'm keeping an eye out for anything I could possibly eat. My first prospect, a coconut tree. I know, it's incredibly ironic, especially given the fact that we're a year out from me even posting my first ever coconut video. This coconut tree is freaking tall. I'm tired, and I know there's no way I can make it up to the top to get those coconuts. The coconut tree is in this water ditch, and I'm right here. I look at down to the base of the tree in the bottom of the ditch, hoping to see maybe some coconuts had fallen down there. Just my luck, there were actually 3 coconuts down there. So I have my eye on these coconuts at the base of the tree, but like I said, life's not gonna let me have them that easy. Just as I'm about to crawl down into the ditch to go get my coconuts, 2 baby alligators crawl out of the water and go sit on top of my fucking coconuts. Like what the fuck? Even though I had done everything for the plot at that point, I was like, I have nothing to lose. I wasn't really trying to take my chances with those baby alligators. I continued running home. Luckily, I ran into this beautiful, bountiful mango tree in someone's front yard. I was feral, animalistic. I was raw dogging that mango, skin and everything. I've never had a more delicious, sweet mango in my life. So I make it back to the Airbnb and I have to check out. I borrow a phone and I call my brother who gets me an Uber to the Fort Lauderdale airport. This is where the story gets even worse. I have no ID, but I have to get through TSA. So when I get to the front of the line, I try to explain to the TSA agent my situation, but she is not having it. They need some kind of proof that I exist as a real person, so she starts asking if I have Facebook or Twitter, and I have neither. This is not looking good. I tell her I have an Instagram and give her my handle, but she needs a recent picture of me and my face and everything to prove that I exist. To make matters worse, at that point in my life, I had terrible self-esteem and equally terrible acne. So I had purposely gone out of my way to make sure that no recent pictures of me or my face or anything were on my Instagram profile. I'm at rock bottom. I'm hopeless. Life has beaten me down, and this seemingly angry TSA lady is aggressively asking me if I actually exist. And after everything that's happened, I'm literally ready to tell her I don't. But luckily, we're able to find pictures that I'm tagged in, and she's able to see me, 18-year-old me, in multiple posts. So I do, in fact, actually exist. I proceed to go get a deep cavity check and then go get my entire bag swabbed for explosives. This swabbing is being done by a different TSA agent. I'll never forget it. He's going through everything. He finally gets to this warm plastic bag full of drenched, sweaty race clothes from 2 days prior that had just been fermenting since. Looked up at me and just shook his head in pity and put the bag back into my backpack and didn't even finish the swabbing. I felt like an ant. And it continues to get even more miserable. There was another 36 hours that included a layover before I would be home back in Albuquerque. I've never regretted booking budget flights more in my life. I'm in the Fort Lauderdale airport for about 5 or 6 hours until my first flight leaves, and I have no entertainment, no phone whatsoever. When I do try and find entertainment, it doesn't work out so well. You know those kiosks that are like all over the airport? I would be in those just trying to read a book or a magazine or something, and I would get kicked out. "You can't be here," she would say. I didn't have the mental energy or stamina to argue with her, so I just abandoned the notion of trying to distract myself with a book or something, and I just sat in my own thoughts, overanalyzing every detail of the trip, ruminating on all of the bad decisions that had brought me here. I will say, as much as I was trying to block all of this out of my mind, I did have a lot of time to sit, think, and reflect. So after pondering on that shit for a while, I eventually came to the constructive conclusion that I would learn from this and be sure not to repeat the same mistakes again. Another wee bit of context I'm gonna add in: because of the way I was raised, I had very strong morals. While Brando was willing to steal peanuts, I wasn't. It's not like I thought I was above that. I just had never shoplifted in my life before, or really even deliberately stole anything. I just didn't know how to steal. However, I was resourceful, so I start strategically sitting near restaurants, and on the DL, I'm salivating and watching people go get their food and then go sit down and eat it. And I see this one dude sitting down to eat this entire whole ass pizza, and my intuition tells me this guy isn't gonna eat all of that, so I keep an eye on him. Sure enough, he goes and dumps his pizza box with 2.5 slices of pizza into the trash. I go over and grab the box out of the trash and eat the pizza. That was literally an appetizer, and I was so hungry. I had already broken the seal on eating out of the trash. I just figured I'd go do it some more. 2 or 3 trash cans later, I found a half-eaten steak and shake burger with some mostly untouched fries. Dinner served. Finally, I get onto my red-eye flight. No pretzels, no free snacks or anything, because Spirit Airlines, hates their customers. The one flight of my entire life that I wish had some kind of complimentary food or drink. Like I said, life will beat you to your knees and then bend you over. So after a miserable flight, I make it from Fort Lauderdale to Denver at like 1 a.m. in the morning. My silly little 45-minute flight from Denver to Albuquerque doesn't leave tomorrow until late afternoon. I get off the plane. The first thing I see is just a janitor, late night vacuuming the floor of the Denver fucking airport like it's closing time or something. Regardless, I go throw my shit down somewhere because I'm tired and exhausted and hungry, and I just get some undisturbed sleep while I still can. Now, if you know anything about the Denver airport, it's a creepy fucking airport. Everything looks the same, but there's a bunch of these weird statues. I got lost so many times in the 16-ish hours that I was there, but I did explore all 3 concourses. I didn't even eat in those 16-ish hours. Every goddamn trash can that I tried to go through had been freshly emptied. It was like the Denver airport was taunting me. Or maybe it was just their janitorial staff. The trash cans weren't even open like the ones in Fort Lauderdale were. They had like a little swinging gate on the side, which makes it incredibly difficult to unsuspiciously try to stick your hand in and like dig for food. My silly little 45-minute flight from Denver to Albuquerque doesn't leave tomorrow until late afternoon. I still had to figure out a few more details with my brother, so I rinsed and repeated that same trick from earlier. There was a knockoff Apple store, the iStore in Concourse B, that had an iPad on display, so I used that, texted my brother, and told him like when I would land and when he could pick me up. And I also told him that the trash cans here were not good and I was starving. But finally, nearly 2 days later, I finally make it home. I'm back in Albuquerque. Brain chemistry changed. Butthole violated. Just kidding. That's a joke. That never happened. Or did it? I don't remember. My brother picks me up. We go to an Asian buffet. I try to eat as much as I can, but honestly, my stomach had shrunk by that point. So that is why we don't talk about Florida until now. This will be my dad lore when I am 40. If you enjoyed this story, follow for more because I have, believe it or not, a lot more wild stories like this. Some big takeaways from this story: if you're under 18, don't go places you don't belong. Also, watch your drinks. Shout out Brando, because he was there and went through the whole thing with me. Also, big shout out to Jorge and Steven for at least trying to look out for your boy. Massive shout out to my older brother Caleb, because I would probably be dead. Coco's Zaddy out.
Left your baby mom, now Cardi's your wife to be. Ex had me locked up, but you came to set me free. They say you're not my type, but you got my type to be. So answer this, can you hold me, can I trust you? Paddock on the wrist, both arms, that's what us do. Mansion on the hills, half if you want to. But that's only